Heathrow Airport early December morning. Elijah Morgan pulled his silver-gray suitcase through the chaotic crowd. He wore headphones, jazz playing softly in his left ear while the right remained uncovered, a habit formed after years of being misunderstood simply because of the color of his skin. The cold winter morning light reflected off the glass, making the passengers appear as if they were drifting between fog and anxiety. He glanced at his first-class ticket, a reward from the company after he had exceeded expectations on a string of projects. Elijah didn't care for wine or hot towels. He needed sleep, silence, and more than anything, to feel that he belonged here just as much as anyone else. Boarding the plane, he entered the first-class cabin, where every seat resembled a small throne. He stowed his leather backpack at his feet, opened an old Graham Greene novel, and sat down. The plane gradually filled. He was engrossed in his book when he heard a whisper near the cabin door. A woman was standing, leaning against the seat with one hand gripping the overhead frame. She was pregnant, that was unmistakable. Beside her stood a man, eyes anxious, constantly glancing back toward the economy cabin. No one in first class seemed to take notice. Elijah hesitated, then stood up. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "please take my seat. You need it more than I do." The woman's eyes widened. The man beside her blinked in surprise. I can't accept this, sir," she said, her voice lightly tinged with a German accent. "It's already yours," Elijah smiled, lifting his backpack. A flight attendant who witnessed the scene gave a satisfied nod. Clara Weiss, that was her name, as he would later learn, sat down in the seat Elijah had just given up, her hands trembling with gratitude. Leon, her husband, gave a silent nod of thanks. Elijah walked down the aisle toward the back, squeezing into a window seat between two men engrossed in their snacks. He didn't complain. He simply looked out at the gray sky, now beginning to turn blue. He didn't know that just a few hours later, the name Clara Weiss would become tied to a series of events that would change his life forever. The large glass windows of Berlin Tegel Airport were streaked with raindrops, sliding down like faded ink trails. Elijah stepped off the plane in a black wool coat, his mood hazy, not quite tired, but not at peace either. As he passed the baggage claim, a familiar gaze caught his eye. Leon Weiss was standing by a coffee counter, raising a hand in greeting. "Elijah, right?" Leon called out, his voice polite but uncertain. Elijah nodded. The two men shook hands, slightly hesitant, as if neither was entirely sure whether this connection was meant to continue. "I hope I'm not overstepping," Leon said. "But Clara insisted I buy you a coffee." Elijah gave a faint smile. "I won't argue with a pregnant woman's wishes." They sat down, two cappuccinos sending up warm steam into the cold airport air. Elijah asked how Clara was doing. Leon replied, "She's stable now. The flight was harder than we expected. She was already fragile. Her father passed just last week." Elijah said nothing, not for lack of words, but because he understood the pain of losing someone without a chance to say goodbye. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. Leon nodded. Then, as if prompted by something deeper, he reached into his coat and pulled out a business card. On the back, scribbled in black ink, it read, "Victor Hartmann, Spezialberatung and Logistik, Prenzlauer Strasse 48. Clara wants to understand what her father left behind. Complicated. Lots of paperwork. Unclear finances. Her father was involved in an import-export business, but now she's getting letters, strange charges, things she doesn't recognize. We're overwhelmed." Elijah leaned in slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" Leon looked him straight in the eye. "Because you gave her your seat. Not out of pity, but because you saw her. That means something. Clara trusts you. I trust you." Silence hung between them for a moment. Elijah slowly rotated his coffee cup on the table. His conscience said, "Be careful. Don't get involved." But another part, one that had been misjudged, denied chances, whispered, "What if this is the reason you're here?" "Let me see the documents," Elijah said. "No promises, but I'll take a look." Leon exhaled, as if relieved of a burden. "Danke." That evening, Elijah received an email from Clara. "We truly appreciate your help. I've attached a zipped folder. Let me know if anything seems off." He opened his laptop, clicked on the folder, and began to read. Lines of numbers danced across the screen. Copies of contracts, import-export invoices, bank statements. Some lined up, but others were strange. A recurring transaction appeared every 2 weeks to an account in Luxembourg, each with the same simple note. Versicherung, Project Hartmann. Insurance, Project Hartmann. Elijah's heart skipped. There was no insurance company named Project Hartmann listed in the official records. And Hartmann, wasn't that the same name on the business card Leon had handed him? Elijah sat upright. Something was wrong. And whatever it was, it might be much bigger than a tangled family business. Elijah's temporary apartment in Berlin was small, minimalist, and so silent that every keystroke echoed off the walls. The clock on the wall read 2:07 a.m., but Elijah wasn't the slightest bit tired. On his screen, an Excel spreadsheet displayed erratic number sequences, with rows highlighted in red, his flagged suspicions. He was no stranger to strange numbers. As a data analyst, he knew when a figure was pretending to be normal. Payments labeled as shipping insurance, special consulting fees, or emergency reserve funds appeared regularly. Amounts ranging from €8,000 to €11,500, always on Mondays, and always transferred to the same IBAN. Yet under the names of 3 different companies, Elijah typed a few more commands into his analysis software. The transfers formed a chain, like a blood trail deliberately smudged, visible enough to raise concern, but not enough to convict anyone. He reopened the business card. Victor Hartmann, Spezialberatung and Logistik. Address, Prenzlauer Straße 48. This man wasn't just a partner. He was the junction point where all the strange transactions converged. The next morning, Elijah stood in front of an old Bauhaus-style building. The facade had been repainted, but the air still carried the musty scent of damp wood. A company sign, Hartmann Consulting, glowed faintly on the digital directory by the entrance. Inside, a receptionist in a crisp white blouse, more like a nurse's uniform than office attire, looked up and asked, "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm a friend of Mr. Weiss. I'd like to speak with Herr Hartmann, if possible." She paused, sent an internal message, then nodded. Room 3.2, but only 10 minutes. Elijah stepped into the elevator, nerves stretched tight. Victor Hartmann was a man of about 60, with dark silver hair and a precisely trimmed beard. His eyes were sharp, calculating. The office was understated, decorated with Asian artifacts, suggesting a taste for sophistication and secrecy. "Mr. Morgan, I've heard your name from Leon," Victor said. His voice was soft, but taut like a wire. "In what capacity are you here?" "I'm just helping Clara review her father's records," Elijah replied, direct. "There are transactions from her father's company sent to accounts linked to yours, under the label of insurance." Victor tilted his head slightly, like a cat catching a strange sound. He stood, poured water for both of them, but didn't answer right away. "In the world of logistics," he said, "there are always unofficial expenses, to make sure shipments don't go astray." Clara's father understood that. "You're talking about bribes?" Elijah asked bluntly. A moment of silence. Victor set down his glass. His eyes now looked like 2 pieces of gray stone. "I'm talking about reality, not ideals. If you want to help Clara, help her protect the family's assets. Don't waste time unearthing the past. Some drawers are better left locked." Leaving Hartmann's office, Elijah felt like he had just stepped out of a mafia interrogation room. But one thing was clear. The man knew far more than he was admitting. And he was hiding something. As Elijah turned a corner, his phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. This isn't your business. Chill." Elijah looked around. No one obviously following, but he felt watched. That night, Elijah reopened the files. The money, the strange invoices, the name Hartmann, and then he found it. A nearly faded handwritten note in the margin of an old report. KH, Container Insurance, Marseille, Rotterdam route. KH, not Klaus Heinrich as he had first thought, but a code for Clyde Harris. A completely new name. Someone who had never appeared in the records, yet seemed to be behind the key shipping routes from France to the Netherlands. Elijah sat up straight. Maybe Hartman was just a middleman. The one pulling the strings was Clyde. Berlin, early morning. The sky was heavy with mist and light rain. Elijah sat by the window of a corner cafe, eyes locked on his laptop screen, while his espresso slowly turned cold. In the search bar, he typed, Clyde Harris plus Rotterdam plus logistics, Clyde Harris plus Marseille plus export, Clyde Harris plus Victor Hartman. No clear results. No company profiles. No images. Not a single official mention in the news. The name Clyde Harris seemed scrubbed from the digital world, and that made Elijah even more wary. In an era where everyone leaves a digital footprint, silence is the loudest warning. Later that afternoon, Elijah met Clara again at a vintage tea room on Karl Marx Alley. She wore a thin sweater, one hand cradling her pregnant belly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharper than before. Clara placed an old envelope in front of him, stamped with the logo of her father's company, Weiss Logistic GmbH. I found this in a small safe hidden behind the bookshelf, Clara said quietly. Just a folder of papers. And a note. Elijah opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of a tripartite contract. Weiss Logistic, Hartman Consulting, and a vague third party. CH Maritime Solutions. Reg No. RQ 01927 inch. No address. No phone number. But at the bottom, a handwritten signature. C. Harris. The attached note contained a single sentence, written in shaky German. Wenn ich verschwinde, fängt MIT Hartmann an. Aber Harris zieht die Fäden. If I disappear, start with Hartmann. But Harris is the one pulling the strings. Elijah looked up. Do you know this name? Clara shook her head. My father never mentioned Clyde Harris. But a few months ago he had a huge argument with her Hartmann. After that he was constantly tense, staying up late, and afraid of something. You think he was threatened? Elijah asked. I believe so. One time I overheard him on the phone saying, I'm not Harris's puppet. I won't continue. But when I asked, he just brushed it off. A few days later, Elijah and Leon traveled to the port city of Rotterdam, following the listed address of CH Maritime. It led them to an abandoned container yard, rusted gate, broken sign. A young guard stood inside, refusing to talk at first. But when Elijah mentioned the name Clyde Harris, the man's eyes widened, and he stepped back like he'd been shocked. I don't know that person, he muttered. Elijah studied him closely. Name tag, J. Deeker. He made a mental note of it. If you don't know him, Leon said coldly, why did you react like you do? Deeker hesitated, then lowered his voice. Harris doesn't sign his name. He doesn't need to show up. But everyone here knows there's someone behind the special shipments. If anything goes wrong, don't come to me. On the drive back, Leon sighed. Feels like we're in some kind of mafia film. Not like, Elijah replied, staring out the window. Worse, because this is all legal through contracts, numbers, signatures. And if someone speaks up, they vanish. That night, Elijah received an anonymous email. Stop, Morgan. We know where you are. Attached was a photo, taken from behind, of Elijah sitting with Clara at the tea shop the day before. He shot to his feet, heart pounding. They weren't just watching him. They knew who he was with. Elijah sat motionless in front of his laptop, eyes fixed on the photo attached to the anonymous email. The image was grainy, taken from behind, but unmistakable. That was him. That was Clara, her ash-gray sweater, her low ponytail, the teacup in front of her. Even the name of the cafe was visible, Tees Tube Rosa. The sender wrote nothing else. No demands, no threats, and that silence chilled Elijah more than any overt warning. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment threat. This was surveillance, sophisticated, patient, quiet, and possibly much closer than he had imagined. He stood up immediately, shut the laptop, yanked out the external drive, and slipped it into his coat pocket. Without turning on the lights, he double-checked the door lock, then pulled the curtains tight. Switching on his phone, he typed a message to Clara. Clara, don't go out alone. And don't open the door unless it's Leon or me. Something's happening. I'll explain in person. The message was marked seen in less than a minute. The next morning, Elijah met Clara and Leon at a small cafe tucked deep in Kreuzberg. No street cameras, no flashy signs. They sat in a dim corner, far from the counter. Elijah set the laptop on the table and showed them the photo. Clara brought a hand to her mouth. Oh God! They're watching us? No, Elijah replied calmly. They already were. Leon clenched his jaw. So there's no doubt now. Clyde Harris knows what we're doing. Elijah nodded. And he wanted to send a message. We see you. We can reach you anytime. We have to go to the police, Clara said quickly. With what? Elijah shook his head. No fingerprints on the photo. Anonymous email. The transactions are all through corporate accounts. No direct evidence tying anything to Harris. If we go to the police now, we're just three anxious people with a bunch of disconnected pieces. Leon tightened his grip on Clara's hand. So what do you plan to do? Elijah looked at them steadily. Track Dieker. That afternoon, Elijah returned to Rotterdam alone. He instructed Clara and Leon to stay in Berlin, remain low profile, and avoid texting anything sensitive. At the docks, the warehouse guard, Dieker, was absent. But Elijah traced his address using the license plate on Dieker's bicycle, a small trick he'd picked up while working in commercial intelligence analytics. Dieker's apartment was in a converted industrial complex, ground floor, behind a pale, weathered steel door. Elijah waited for a moment, then rang the bell. No response. He waited 5 minutes, then turned to leave, just as the door creaked open. You? Dieker's voice came from behind the partially open door. I'm not here to hurt you, Elijah said plainly. But if you don't talk now, the next person who comes may not be so polite. Dieker glanced around, then gestured. Quick! Inside. The apartment was cluttered with boxes and old documents. Dieker didn't offer a seat, didn't pour water. He stood, slightly trembling, and pulled something from his coat pocket. A USB stick. I don't know everything, but I used to handle transport records for Harris. Encryption, container codes, disguising cargo. Kept a backup, just in case. Elijah took the USB. Is it enough to bring him down? Dieker shook his head. Not by itself, but combined with Weiss logistics files, and if you know someone who can decode the route structure, then maybe. Why give it to me now? Elijah asked. Because I was just watched, Dieker whispered, swallowing hard. Someone stood outside my place last night, didn't say anything, just smoked, stared at me, like a warning. Elijah left Rotterdam that same night, the USB hidden in a sock inside his shoe. He arrived back in Berlin around 3 a.m. and sent Clara a short message. We have a counterattack. Stay safe. More tomorrow. He opened the USB in a secure, isolated virtual environment. The data inside made his breath catch. Over 30 shipments, container IDs, departure/arrival ports. Major routes: Marseille, Rotterdam, Hamburg. Customs fees funneled through 3 shell companies in Estonia and Cyprus. Code names for recipient partners, including one entry marked in red. CH. Clyde Harris. A lightly encrypted memo attached confirmed it. Clyde wasn't just involved, he was orchestrating it, using Hartmann's name to legally front the movement of potentially illicit cargo, gemstones, or possibly small-scale military tech. The next morning, Elijah handed the full dataset to a lawyer named Jonas Kraus, a friend from university, now part of a European Internal Affairs advisory network. Jonas read everything, then sat silently for a long time before finally saying, If what you've given me is real, Harris isn't just laundering money. He's part of an international network. This is EU-level criminal activity. Elijah nodded. So, can you? I'll take it straight to the EU's Financial Crimes Unit. But from this point on, you and Clara's family must disappear. Stay completely off-grid. Elijah returned to the apartment, packed a backpack, and had just zipped it shut when his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A low, ageless voice spoke in English, with the faintest German accent. "Mr. Morgan, you don't belong in this game. We'll let you walk away if you know when to stop. But if not..." The line went dead. No screaming, no threats. But Elijah understood. The safe boundary had been crossed. He texted Clara, "Disappear. Now, I'll explain later. Don't call." He had officially entered dangerous territory. But Elijah also knew, when evil starts speaking, it means truth has gotten close enough to touch its skin. The sun had yet to rise. Berlin was still shrouded in fog, its rain-slicked streets nearly deserted. Elijah, dressed in dark clothing with a cap pulled low over his face, moved quickly through Alexanderplatz. He didn't dare bring his primary phone. All communication now ran through a temporary device provided by Jonas Kraus. No SIM card, no camera, no microphone. To the outside world, he looked like any other tourist strolling through a quiet city. But in his mind, a battlefield, numbers, container codes, acronyms, maritime route maps, all circling one name, Clyde Harris. Meanwhile, in a temporary sublet in Charlottenburg, Clara and Leon packed in silence. No suitcases. No traces. Just a few folded clothes in backpacks, personal documents, and a sealed envelope containing a backup USB, the same one Elijah had sent them. Leon looked at his wife, voice tight. "I hate running, but I won't let anyone come near you. Or the baby." Clara rested her hand on her full belly and nodded. No words were needed. Only safety. At the same time, in Brussels, headquarters of the EU Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU, Jonas Kraus stood before three officials, all in dark suits, their faces as unreadable as marble. Under cold white light, a large screen displayed the financial flowchart Elijah had built. Weiss Logistic Hartmann Consulting shell companies in Estonia linked accounts cycling a loop of untraceable containers. Jonas spoke. "We have a witness. Original data. Digital evidence. If this holds up, it's one of the most sophisticated money laundering and illicit cargo networks currently operating and possibly linked to small arms trafficking." One official asked. "Name of the central figure?" Jonas answered succinctly. "Clyde Harris. No ID. No tax records. But every money trail revolves around him." The next day, Elijah received a secure message from Jonas. "Surveillance order on Harris is under review. But he has people inside. Keep your distance. Be careful with Hartmann." Elijah clenched his jaw. Victor Hartmann, polished suits, glass-walled office, the clean face of logistics consulting was Harris's long arm in Berlin. And he knew Elijah had been digging. That afternoon, Elijah returned to the Hartmann Consulting building, this time not through the front desk. He slipped in through the delivery entrance at the rear, used by courier services. He carried no weapon, only a decoy USB drive bait. Third floor, room 3.2. The office door was ajar. He pushed it open, empty. The computer was still on. Quickly, he scanned the screen and snapped photos of the open files. An Excel document titled Marseille Revised Manifest Q4 had been edited just 10 minutes earlier. A new shipment schedule. Departure set for next week. He captured everything, then turned to leave. Just as he stepped into the hallway, the elevator chimed, ding. The doors slid open. Victor Hartmann stepped out. Their eyes met. No anger. No panic. Only a smile, thin as a razor. "Mr. Morgan," Victor said. "I take it you found what you were looking for?" Elijah stood tall, unflinching. "Enough to trigger a cross-border investigation." "You really believe the system will protect you?" Hartmann asked. "Clyde has eyes everywhere. What you think is justice could be turned into an indictment against you. Then I suggest you start cleaning up your own files," Elijah replied, gaze steady. "Because I'm not afraid of you anymore." Hartmann stepped forward slowly, stopping just inches away. He leaned in and whispered, "We don't need you to be afraid. We just need you to be quiet." Elijah pulled out the temporary phone and pressed send, sending all screenshots to the investigative unit. One to Jonas, one to Clara. A moment of stillness. For the first time, a crack appeared in Hartmann's perfect smile. "You're reckless, Morgan?" "No. I just don't belong in your world. And I'll never be a tool for someone like Clyde Harris." Elijah turned sharply down the corridor, walking like someone who had just broken their last chain. That night, Jonas called. "I just got the alert. An emergency search warrant has been approved for Hartmann's office. They're moving in tonight." The next morning, headlines exploded across major European news outlets. International money laundering network exposed, Clyde Harris and associates officially wanted. Victor Hartmann was arrested at his office. Clyde Harris, still at large, was last seen in the northern French port region, possibly preparing to flee to Africa. Elijah sat quietly in Clara's small apartment. The baby was asleep. Clara stood by the window, sunlight warming her hair. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Elijah replied softly. "We did it. And we'll keep going if he ever comes back." The last light of day stretched across the cold gray sea, while gusts of wind battered the cliffs of Normandy like whispered warnings. On a coastal road near the town of Etretat, a silver car slowed and stopped, hidden behind a line of low trees. Elijah stepped out, wrapped in a thick windbreaker, eyes scanning the small fishing harbor in the distance. Beside him stood Jonas Kraus, casually dressed but wearing a discreet earpiece and holding a compact GPS tracker. Last confirmed signal from the device Clyde used, under a fake name, was traced to a private sailing yacht called Nocturne, Jonas said. "It left Etretat harbor 47 minutes ago, heading south, possibly to Jersey or Cherbourg." Elijah frowned. "He's trying to leave Europe by sea? Or stop over at the Channel Islands, then transfer to a freighter bound for North Africa?" Jonas replied evenly. "We've got an international warrant this time. But if he crosses into UK waters, things get messy." Elijah said nothing. He was calculating. Until now, he'd fought with data and strategy. But now, the game had shifted to the field. In the English Channel, the Nocturne cut through the waves, the low hum of its diesel engine droning behind the cockpit. Below deck, Clyde Harris stood over a digital chart table, eyes flicking across the satellite screen. His hair, streaked with gray, framed a body still lean and controlled. His gaze was as cold as forged steel. Opposite him, a man wearing headphones monitored marine police frequencies. "We're picking up French signals. They may dispatch patrol boats earlier than expected." "Change course," Clyde said sharply. "Forget Jersey. Redirect to Dialect. Kill the transponder." The man nodded, fingers tapping commands. Clyde stood and stepped out onto the deck. The sea wind slapped across his face, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid of the law. He just hated being hunted. At a mobile command center in Le Havre, a team of French agents gathered around a digital maritime map. Jonas stood beside the chief commander, Elijah watching the radar screen closely. "The Nocturne signal just went dark," one agent said. "He's running silent," Jonas muttered. "We have to guess his landing point." Elijah stared at the map. His eyes darted across secondary routes. Then he spoke without hesitation. "He won't risk a major port. Too visible. But he'll need fuel if he plans to go farther. There's a small station at Port de Dialet, quiet, no mandatory AIS tracking. He'll pick that." The commander looked at Elijah, then at Jonas. "You're sure?" "As sure as the money trails that pass through Estonia," Elijah replied, eyes still locked on the map. That night, Port de Dialet. The wind howled in bursts. The fuel station by the mooring was temporarily closed. Distant fishing boats blinked yellow lights across the choppy water. A small boat appeared, no running lights, gliding slowly into the harbor. On deck stood Clyde, hood drawn, eyes sweeping the darkness. He didn't know. French agents had already formed a perimeter, hidden in the shadows. Jonas, holding a radio, whispered, "Wait until he docks. Do not engage while he's on the water." Elijah crouched behind a large oil drum, heart pounding. Ahead of him was the man who had threatened, manipulated, and forced Clara into hiding. Now he was less than 100 meters away. Clyde jumped onto the pier. His accomplice followed. The moment his feet hit concrete, a loudspeaker blared. "Clyde Harris, stop. You are surrounded by the European Union Task Force. Drop your weapon and put your hands on your head." Clyde whirled around. His eyes didn't show fear, only fury, like a cornered predator. He pulled something small from his pocket, possibly a tracker or a detonation trigger. "He's trying to wipe the data," Jonas shouted. Elijah bolted from cover, yelling, "Clyde, no one's coming to save you. Put it down." Clyde saw him, and for a split second, something in his expression flickered. Not fear, but Resignation. He let go. The device shattered on the concrete. Agents rushed in. Handcuffs snapped tight around Clyde Harris's wrists. 2 weeks later, Berlin. News broadcasts echoed across Europe. International financial criminal Clyde Harris arrested. Cross-continental money laundering and smuggling network dismantled. Elijah sat on the small balcony of Clara's apartment. Spring sunlight spilled across the coffee cup in his hands. Inside, Clara cradled their daughter, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. Leon moved around the kitchen, making breakfast, occasionally glancing over with a smile. Clara stepped onto the balcony and handed Elijah an envelope. "It's from the German Ministry of the Interior. They're thanking you for your role in the case. And they've offered you a position as an advisor." Elijah smiled and took the envelope, but he set it aside. "I didn't do it for the offer. I did it because I used to be the man no one gave up a seat for. And for the first time in my life, I chose to stand before anyone had to ask." Clara smiled. "And will always be grateful you did." Down on the street, the gentle ringing of a bicycle bell echoed. A quiet morning. No more anonymous calls. No more threats. No more shadows behind bank accounts. Elijah looked up at the clear blue sky, heart unburdened. His journey had begun with a seat he gave away, and ended with a world he helped protect.